And our speaker today was born and raised in upstate New York on a Tonawanda Indian reservation. Among his many accomplishments, he serves on the French Creek Archaeological Society Board of Directors, is the cultural advisor and master blacksmith at the Fort LaBeouf Museum. He speaks frequently at universities and is featured as a cultural advisor on many movies and TV programs, including the PBS Chronicle series about the Erie Indians and Pontiac's revenge. And now I present today's speaker, who is the last living descendant of Chief Corn Planter Leo Sam Briggs.
I'm going to pass around a passport. There's not a lot of these because you have to be traditional enrolled. Seneca or Haudenosaunee to have one of these passports. My name is Leon Sam Briggs. I am from the Tonawanda Indian Reservation, or territory as we talk about it. I am Hawk Clan. My Seneca name is Hoy de Gehas, which means he helps out always. That's my elder's name, and I was born and raised in upstate New York there. We moved the second time in Pennsylvania to Waterford, and I went to Fort LaBeouf and graduated there. But we were just talking, this is the first place I ever roller skated. My mother used to roller skate and she was in competition when she was in the military, and we actually came here for FFA, and that was the first time I ever come here. I'd like to thank everybody, singing Scano, which is our traditional greeting, to welcome you here. One of the things we're going to talk about, I'm going to do 4 different sections. One is kind of a local history and introduction. Then, we're going to go into some of the other parts of history. And then today, but again, I'm from the Tonawanda Seneca territory. And, one of the questions that we had, Butch is in here, so we can get after Butch. But he's like, what's the truth about the guy, when they talked about Guyasuda and the other chiefs and stuff? And I said, well, there's never a chief named Canadohta. We've only had 50 chiefs. We've only ever had 50 chiefs. Those chiefs, their lineage is listed down. When Washington came through, to him, that was his lake. That was the first lake that he came upon before they went to LaBeouf. So when we talk about, his thing, what he did, I can talk about it because Guyasuda was with him, and I'm a 7th generation descendant of Guyasuda, 6 from Corn Planter. I'm the last direct descendant on Tonawanda. There's others, but there's less than 600 of us, total left, on Tonawanda and in the nation there. So one of the things that we talk about is our literal history, and then people they say, "Well, that stuff wasn't written down." I said, well, one of the things you got to look at was Corn Planter was educated. Guyasuda was educated. They could write better and read better than 90% of the people in the military. And you look at some of the letters and stuff that they wrote to, George Washington, to the forefathers, to Ben Franklin. A lot of the things that they did and they talked about was trying to stand with our protection of who we are. And in the Constitution, we're the only ones protected by Article 6 in the Constitution, the Supreme Right of Way, because it gives treaties. It says there's unapproachable. The government tries it, but when we travel, we have different wampum belts. A lot of these straps, wampum belts, they all state, different parts of history. We have ones that are made for us. We have wampum strings that are for positions. We have nomination belts. We have belts and stuff that were used. The Canadohta belt, or the George Washington belt, it was one of the biggest or one of the longest. It's a little over 6 foot, about 6'6", but there was 9,600 beads, wampum beads on that. So you think about that, the beads that are on that, the white bead comes from the whelk shell, from that center column. And the Quahog is where the purple or the black beads come from. You may get, 5 or 6, maybe a dozen out of a big shell, but most of the Quahog shells and stuff now, it takes 40 years for them to get to maturity to be able to use them. So you think of 9,600 beads, how many shells that was. 90% of all the belts that are made for us were all made by the women because they're brought to life, they're a creation of life. We are a matriarchal society, so we believe that women are born sacred and men have to work up to that. The United States calls itself a democracy. Democracy means complete division, but there's not a complete division. We are a matriarchal society. We have a complete division. The women hold all the power. The women hold all the power. They're the givers of life, and the men hold the positions. But the men are put in those positions, and now we can start. But when we look at that, that's a protection of our life. So people don't understand that. It says, well, if you have 20 men sitting on a board and they're discussing war, and you have 20 women sitting on there discussing war, women are going to think a lot more about sending their children and the ones that they carried into war. And a lot of the pride and stuff of the men, it's a lot of times they just do it. And so we stay as a matriarchal society. So that's what we are, our names, who we are, our children, everything follows. The United States is supposed to be a democracy. Well, turn it over to women, I think they might do a lot better job than a lot of the mistakes we have now. But when you look at things like that, and you look at that division, if everything is one-sided, it's only going to last so long. If everybody were, gas well drillers, you're going to have holes every place, and then the whole water's going to leak out or be polluted. So when we talk about our matriarchal society, it's a balance of life. So when we do that, and when we're teaching, is that we keep our children safe. We talk about the covenant chain and the white word peace. White word peace, a lot of times people will see our Haudenosaunee belt when they see our different designs and stuff, and even like on the back of my shirt has the Hiawatha belt. Hiawatha belt, that's the foundation of who we are. The center tree, that's Onondaga, that's Onondaga, New York. That tree still stands there. Every year when we get ready for Guyweedle and go to some of these ceremonies, we go to that property. The people that own that property, they respect us and they honor us, and they've always welcomed us there. You get to the Senecas, or the keepers of the western door, Mohawks in the east, and then you have Oneida and Cayugas in between. People say, well, the Tuscarora. Well, Tuscarora were adopted in, but in the longhouse, they sit here. They sit under the arm of the Tonawanda Senecas because they are on Tonawanda Seneca land. Being that Tonawanda is where we are at the western door, anybody comes that wants to go to Grand Council has to come to Tonawanda first, because that's where everything started. That's where the Peacemaker's journey started. They talk about Hanson Lake and the Peacemaker's journey. His mother and grandmother are buried in the front yard where I grew up. He was here. He came to Canadohta Lake. or Washington's Lake, however you want to look at it or talk about it. But one of the things they did, a lot of people were talking earlier about, they said, well, there was this village and that. We had encampments around here. When we traveled, one of the unique things about Erie and Crawford County is French Creek. And the tributaries that come off of French Creek, it's considered one of the most sacred areas. This really wasn't inhabited for long-term villages. And people say, well, why didn't they do villages and stuff? And just, what do you need if if you had a village? People say, oh, the animals, well, that's part of it. And he said, well, you're planting, well, that's part of it too. But it's firewood. You didn't have microwaves. We didn't have the big wood stove. So you had to gather firewood. So if you had a community and you started, and generally within 5 years, you're out to having to travel a mile to gather firewood. If you were going and you were cutting trees down, be careful with this because this is an original piece. This is actually what was used for cutting trees. We're going to talk about this. This is a Stone Age, and it's pretty local. It was found in Tree Bridge. It's just up the road. This was given to me by one of the guys that lived up there, and he said that he remembers when he's 90 now, and he said he was probably 8 or 10 when him and his brother found it. So when you're looking at this is what you had, to cut trees down. This was pre-contact. We didn't have knives. You didn't have a lot of your metals. We did have copper. We did have silver, but there wasn't, the variety of metal, tomahawks, anything like that. One of the other things about Erie and Crawford County was the salt. Does anybody know where the biggest salt mine was? Hightown? Where's Hightown? That's downstream. Waterford. Where the ballpark is right now, that was a salt mine. There was literally a tunnel that went from there down behind the museum. They different times that they cut into that tunnel in different places digging, but they literally had after 1753 when they found all the salt, and George Washington was sent up there to tell the French to move out, and they said, well, come in and have a drink for a couple of days, and then they told them, no, we're staying, so they sent him back down to York. But they built it there because of the salt. It's some of the purest salt and stuff that they could find. And so when you look at it, that was one of the reasons that they built that fort there. After, there were 3 forts there. When the French left, they burned the first ones down. Then they built the second one, and my ancestors burned it down. And then they built the third one, and my ancestors burned it down. But one of the unique things about that was the portage roads, from Lake Erie and from up New York coming down. The French came down the upper part, which was now Westfield, and you see what portage road is there as they come down through. But they get to, just off of there, they get hit Chautauqua Lake, come down Chautauqua Lake, down French Creek, and then down the Buff Creek. But one of the biggest things was the salt. The salt was transferred from the forts and stuff there. And there at one time, they talked about there was over 200 pirogues, or flat bottom boats, that were bayed there that carried salt, and they waited for it, the spring floods. They pushed them all in the water and take them all the way down to Pittsburgh. And then the boats where a pirogue is actually a boat that's made out of flatwood. So they would saw all the wood there, make the boats square, pointed, and then they would set them down, and then they offload them, and then they would sell the wood. So that's kind of the first history of this production, of how things got to be here and why things are here. When we talk about the name, Guide City, we talk about the name Corn Planter, talk about Red Jacket, Queen Aliquippa. It's very unique that all of them people had traveled through here many a times, because our territory and stuff was all the way down into Tennessee. Aliquippa and the Half King, or Tanversian, they were just north of Pittsburgh. There was Zillion, Opal, and Beaver Center and stuff like that. So they followed there, but they would come to meetings. They would go to Letchworth. Anybody who'd ever been to Letchworth, to the state park there was a tree there called the beating tree. It was 32 feet inside. And they had notes and stuff talking about some of the messages that there was over 250 people sitting inside that tree. You look at, you try to find a tree that's even a quarter of that size now. But when we talk about the literal history, we look at our wampum strength, we look at our wampum belts, that gives, our history. We talk about some of the different designs and why they were made, why they were done for trees. But those were considered, the sacred part of our teachings. So when we look at these, this is a literal history, but we can hand those in, we can go in and hold them. We can tell that speech, word for word, how it was portrayed when those were handed out. When you look at this ads that's going around here, and you see all of this stuff. So you were limited. Well, the women were the ones that made the decision when it was time to move to town. And when they made that decision was, how much food was there? How much firewood was there? How much traveling they had to do to get there. So that's why you find a lot of these smaller communities. Even in this area, I know of 6 different mound burials. And we watch over them a couple times, known contractors and people that have dug into them, but those are protected. They talk about some of the burials would be the west side of the lake. Some of the stuff that where the old peat bogs and stuff were up there that have been filled in. Some of the remains and stuff that were found, some of the stuff that Mercyhurst and Edinburgh, studied. And still a lot of that stuff, still there at the universities. So we talk about, the historical societies and different organizations, to get those, the way they still have that history. But then anything that's for the burial remains needs to go back into the ground. So when we talk about this lake in this area, like I said, it was considered one of the most protected religiously. And that's why there was a lot of communities and stuff here. Just by going by the fish and stuff that way, there used to be sturgeon. It used to come up, all the way through French Creek. Now they got dams and stuff in. They talk about some of the fish where Neil Maloney's place is on the other side of Cambridge Springs. We did archaeological digs there through our archaeological society. They found partial pieces of fish weirs over the years. And Edinburgh had done some studies and stuff on them. Yeah. They didn't understand the size of them. And just, that's because there were sturgeon in there. You don't find the sturgeon here. One of the things that Corn Planter noted in their history and stuff was the eel runs that used to be here, where they used to come up the creeks and Muddy Creek, all the way to the to Lake LaBeouf, all the way up through into French Creek, New York. And now, because of all the dams and the pollution stuff, you don't see the eel runs, you don't see the smell. Waterford, Lake LaBeouf, that's where all your tiger muskies came from. Every muskie around the world, tiger muskie, can be native to that lake. There's 14 varieties of clams or mollusks that are from French Creek. You have one that is in Canadohta Lake that is on that list. And you know, it's protected. I see a lot of the farmers are complaining because of the new protection law that came out with LaBeouf Creek and French Creek becoming, you know, a protected waterway. Well, you can't take the pollution. We were talking earlier that, you know, you can't even eat the fish out of Canadohta Lake. There's a ban on eating fish out of Canadohta Lake. You know, and you look at the algae that's already started. You know, and this is the first part of June. So what's it going to be like when it hits August, when you start getting into the real heat? But you'll find out in the next week how fast it grows, because when it hits 90 degrees, there have been discussions from some of the people in the Fish Commission. Well, they should make these smaller lakes like LaBeouf, make it a no-wake lake. You can't take a jet ski on LaBeouf. Jet skis are the number one pollution because their water runs through the exhaust back into the water. So, you know, they're running those biochemicals and stuff right into the water every time they use them. So you've got something here that's, to us, is considered sacred, as long as the Holy people or Indigenous people. So, you know, you guys, you need to look at that. What's it going to be like in 10 years? You know, if you're down to having issues and stuff now. I don't know if they ever dredged this? No? I know they did it up at LaBeouf, and maybe a couple other ones that they're starting to talk about dredging. But I know when the water levels drop down, people have found artifacts, you know, walking different parts of the old stumps and stuff were. And usually guys go out there collecting lures, but you know, they start finding arrowheads and some of your other pieces. So when you look at it, you know, it's a unique area. It's, you know, it's one of those waterways that's not found anywhere else in the world. You know, get up to Chautauqua, you know, you look at the problems that they're having there. I mean, they got fish that are having 2 mouths and all kinds of different, and they're thriving. You know, that's from the biohazards. So when you got this lake here, Lake LaBeouf, you know, it used to be up the Union City Reservoir, and it's in the dam and stuff. They found that the runoff stuff that they had, that they could no longer maintain it because of the pollution from all of the Roundup and everything being used running into there. So that's why they just drained all the water out. So, you know, they can no longer use it. So now you can't even drive back there, so you have to walk. You guys, how I usually work things, if you have any questions, you can put your hand. Generally, we always ask people to stand when they ask a question, but you know, you can just put your hand up. So as we're going, if you have a question at that time, don't be afraid to ask it. Except for which. That's breakfast time. Go ahead.
I just had a question about that passport. That looks, it's like, that's an Indian passport, correct?
Well, it's when you show your passport. We're not from India.
Well, how does that compare to your regular passport? Maybe because I have a regular passport, but what is that one used for?
That supersedes federal law.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Because we are not governed by the Constitution of the United States. We have supreme law of the land, and that's listed in there under those treaties. That is recognized by every other government around the world. We can travel out of the country on it, but we cannot use it to come back to the United States because they tell us we're not United States citizens.
Well, I used to live in New York for 40 years, so I traveled 90 all the time, coming back to this area where our folks live. And I thoroughly enjoy the signs that you guys have up there on the interstate that says you're now entering the Seneca Nation.
Right.
I love those signs, and I really love the time you guys built your fires on the interstate because Andy was trying to make you pay tax on your stuff, and it was like, yeah, do it.
Yeah, and that happened twice. The right of taxation in the United States is not legal, and that's been proven time after time. But the government's going to fight it because that's all free money to them.
I enjoyed what you did.
But go ahead.
The sacred tree, would you have an idea what species that tree was?
It is a white pine. Right. That's why when you see that pine, it was planted. If you look at some of the drawings and stuff, and you'll see, knives, you'll see tomahawks, you'll see war clubs. Those were put in the ground below it, and then that tree was planted on top of it. That's what they call the white root piece.
Did you hollow it out, or
No.
did you hollow it out naturally?
No, that tree up there was, they figure when it finally fell, the one at Letchworth, that it was about 2,700 years old. There was prehistoric, minerals and stuff in it. But we're on Tonawanda Lake there were the white pine tree that still stands. It's like we're forever listening to people come in. Oh, is that the tree there that George Washington climbed up to look into the fort? Says, no, those trees weren't there. Those trees some of them weren't even there in the 70s. So there's no way. And he surely did not spend the night in the Eagle Hotel because Eagle Hotel was built 100 years after he was gone. So we kind of look at some of that stuff.
Yeah, when you were saying earlier about Washington met with the Indian, and could you give us a little more of that story? How we know how it all happened that he met with the Indian and traveled through there and was here at Canadohta Lake, and it was called Washington Lake.
Well, when he was actually sent by Dimwitty, I just call him Dunwitty, when he was sent with the letter when he was 21 years old in 1753 to go to Port LaBeouf to tell the French to leave. It was a demand, it wasn't asking him, and they said no. But when they had left, he had studied mapping, he had done a lot of creation of maps and stuff. So in his journal, if you ever get a chance to look at them, and we have reproductions of it, but it shows that history as it comes up. And it talks about Canadohta. It talks about, Washington Lake, as he wrote it. But then Little Cooley, one of the guys that was hit with them in their earliest one of the military guys that died in, I think it was 1754, is buried there at the one cemetery, Little Cooley. One of the ladies that's archivalist, they got two different burials here, but they got the wrong name for the burial, the one that was with them. But Gaius Suter was the one that was given, that said, well, we'll take you there because they wouldn't have made it because we controlled, the entire area all the way down to Tennessee. So when they were traveling, Gaius Suter, being one of the chief sachems, he escorted them and as they went to Fort LaBeouf, and then you see the places where they stopped and notations and stuff up on Allegheny at Franklin, then Cooperstown, then as they come up through here and then across to through Little Cooley and up to the lake. If you look at that, you can actually follow that trail. If you look at the Washington Trail maps and stuff, there's a lot of people, Boy Scouts that did it for years, and they had merit badges and stuff for it, but now they're showing a lot of the literal history, going down even to Canadohta town. That's where Guy Suda is buried. That's where his wife is buried. So they're at the Boy Scout reservation, just off of the camp there. And there's actually a monument and stuff there. And Mercyhurst had been down there, and they did look at some of the graves and stuff that were dug up in the 30s and 40s. But then they did digital and magnetic imaging, to go through some of these places. One of the things that followed George Washington, we call it Indigenous, which means, people say, oh, that's town destroyer. Says, no, it means he bites on the town. And that was because of what he did to the Seneca Nation, what he did to the Haudenosaunee. A lot of times people call us Iroquois. We don't use that word. It says, if you're dealing with colored people, you can't use the N word. And I says, well, why are you using Iroquois? I said, it's a derogatory comment. Even though they got a school district named after us, we just kind of laugh. Well, that's a good place to go to school. When we're teaching a lot of this, we go into the different sections of, why they went to different places. First, when they came up, they met with Aliquippa, Queen Aliquippa, and then Tanacrissia, the half-king. So we met with them first, and then got the permission and stuff to go to the next step, and then they came up through, and then where Guy Suda's family and stuff was, coming up through Canadohta town and the rest of it, and they just guided and then went up. So then they spent the time, the 3 days there, and then going through, and French brought them in, gave them all kinds of food and gave them booze and everything, and then, had a party. And then the morning of the third day, they says, no, you can take your letter back. He says, we're not leaving. Yes, sir.
Legend has it that, Drake Wells is very close by.
Right.
Legend has it that the Indians would come to Canadohta Lake and oil would seep out of the lake and
And it still does. There, if you go up to the far end of the lake, you go up that little stream, there's one place that we found that in April, there are still oil seepages there. And that crude oil, you can pick it up and eat it. It's 100% digestible. You go to Rouseville, where the Vidal plant is, it's still being used off of the McClintock well. When crude oil comes up through the ground, it's 100% digestible. The Mystery Pits of Drake Well, they were sold to, I forget what the name of the people were, but that was the Seneca Oil Company. And that's it because of that crude. Well, you can still get the same crude oil now in jars. It's still in business, but it's used for hair. But most people that have horses know that it's one of the best luminants in medical things to use on a horse's legs or feet. Amish around here still use it. But the Mystery Pits in Titusville there, they were back. Otavazio from Mercyhurst did the digging stuff there, and he says, they're 12, 14,000 years old. Well, then he wrote in his book that there's no use of petroleum products prior to European contact. I said, well, it doesn't take a mathematician to figure out when Columbus got lost in 14,000 years. The numbers don't add up. So why he wrote it in a book where people can read it and say, well, I guess that's a lie. And you look at things like that. We were talking earlier, when I was talking to Pam, we were talking about history. What is history? It's his story. If I started here in the old telephone game, whisper something into her ear, see what it got when it got over here. How much is it going to change? So when you look at a lot of those, our belts, those are a literal history. Each one of those designs has a specific meaning and specific teachings. So in our language and stuff, we're using those, and each one of those beads has, has a reason that it's there. It's not just, oh, it looks pretty, we'll place it here. Yes?
Two-part question. Do you have oil and gas on your reservation, and are you allowed to produce it?
We do not on Tonawanda. We will never have it on Tonawanda. Allegheny and Canadohta do, but they gave up their religious rights. They are not a sovereign community. They are not, because of the money they took when Kenzu Dam was put in, and then having their casinos and everything. To have a casino, the federal government, anybody that has a casino does not have federal rights. And then once the casino goes in, they lose that because they have to have 2 members from the state gaming commission and 2 members from the federal gaming commission. One of them is using an attorney for financial, the other is using an attorney for law on both sides. So once you do that, you've given up that right. All the other nations other than Onondaga, Tonawanda, and there's only a few left that are 100% sovereign. We still run by the chieftain society. Every other reserve is a reservation, and it runs by the Articles of Incorporation. If a corporation fails, it goes to the government. The government takes control of it. It doesn't matter what company it is. That's federal law. We do not deal with federal law. So if we have somebody comes onto our reservation and like murders somebody, if we do not take care of it then and they leave the reservation, they can't be charged because they do not recognize us. But if we do something and we're on both sides, we can be charged both ways with double jeopardy. We are the only ones that are susceptible to double jeopardy in federal law.
I'm going to bring you back again to the lake story. So many of us read these articles in the paper over the past 20 years that Chief Cornplatter's daughter's name was Canadohta and he named it after. Did they have, like you said to me the other day, maybe they had villages or encampments around the lake like we come for our vacations? Like, did people just, they didn't really live there year round, but they'd come and settle there and fish and,
Right.
and whatever your elaboration is on
Right.
that story about the name.
And anybody under the White Root of Peace could come and stay. Right now, there's like 48 other nations that fall under the White Root of Peace for the Haudenosaunee, Cherokees, Onondagas, all the different nations, other than our five nations and stuff. So Miami's, so people could come in and they could stay, and that was traditional rights. But John O'Bale is Cornplatter's name. Half white, half Seneca. But his daughters were named that. And I know because I've got the whole lineage. We can read everybody's name on her. And so when we're looking at that, he says, well, we have other names that appear in some of the historical registries and stuff. But generally, all of the names, as they follow that, then they're all matriarchal because they all follow the mother's side of the family. So if the mother's Hawk clan, the father's Wolf clan, the children are all Hawk clan.
Social hierarchy, talking about names. Okay, so the women, they really control the reins.
Right.
How is courtship, dating, marriage, marrying someone outside of the tribe? How did that
A lot of times, generally in the Great Law, it talks about Ongohoe people marrying Ongohoe people. You didn't marry anybody from your same clan, even though you might not be physically related, you're still religiously or spiritually related. Everything ran through the mother's side, but a lot of times there weren't a lot of weddings because it was okay. So you're dating, that's the best part. Then you get married, and no. Well, how they looked at it a lot of times was, you know, I've seen people that have been married for 75 years on our reservation. And when they went through and she had passed, not even a year later he had passed. And he said, well, he died of a broken heart. But and he always said, he says, this has been the greatest part of my life, 89 years of dating her. So that's the way they look at it. Jealousy is another thing that's not in, because a lot of times, you look at our communities and stuff. You may have 3-4 generations living in the same house. When we had long houses, when we had some of the smaller houses, some of the long houses, they were 300 foot long. And you may have each section set up for each clan. And whatever was on the right was opposite on the left. So the Hawk clan was on the right, the Wolf clan would be on the left. Every Morty has its separation. Yes?
Our conversations you mentioned tonight, I think it's interesting that the one thing I haven't forgot is when you mentioned Iroquois. And I don't think anybody understands what Iroquois means in you.
Yeah. Iroquois is an Algonquin word. And the Algonquins found that when they came, they would travel 200 or 300 in a war party. We would travel, 12 to 20. They were smaller parties, but they were losing these battles. 200 or 300, to a couple dozen. So they used the word Iroquois, which means lower than a snake or lower than a snake's belly, because of the way they went through the woods. They said half the time, they would go past a Seneca warrior, then the Seneca warrior would stand up and cut them from behind, because they knew camouflage. So when the French got here, the French were like, well, we're going to be using, they seen our game of lacrosse, and they said, well, we're going to be real easy to convert these people, because, our old sticks, they just had a web in the middle just to cross. And, it's going to be really easy to convert these people because they play a game called lacrosse. That's where that word came from. Until they started fighting against the Senecas and Mohawks, and they found out that, they were losing, a lot of the battles. So that's where the Iroquois come from. They pluralized it, and where Iroquois come from. So we do not use that. We find, that it's a slap in the face. But go to the school district up here, and they had one of the things. I got a lot of letters from some of the people up there, and because of doing some of the, I was on the Chronicle series. I was doing 4 of them. And we talked about the Erie's Indians, and Mike Berlin asked us, he says, are you comfortable talking about Iroquois? I said, yeah, I have no problem with that. And he says, well, he said, people need, and then all of these people, I guess they had a whole school board meeting and stuff about it. And it's like, hey, you can keep the word, that's fine. I said, when everybody else starts laughing at you, when they know what it really means, it's like going to Chicago. Chicago means skunk town. So when you look at a lot of those histories of where the names and stuff come from, and we kind of laugh because we travel, so, well, this was named after this Seneca word or something like that. No. And there's a town down by Waltham, PA, that's got a name there, and they're all happy about it. And it's actually the word for the women's reproductive organs. And that's the name of their town. We just leave it go at that. Then you have Waltham, PA, and you have some of the others, and other people that did. It's like Jim Thorpe, PA. Some of the ones that have been changed. But even with that, a lot of that brings back the history and stuff like at Carlisle. The boarding schools, and a lot of us when we talk, one of the things recently we did was say, Okanoni and Watson, we're thanking our grandparents. Because if they hadn't survived the boarding schools, if our mothers, fathers hadn't survived, we would not be here. You know, and a lot of us that have been through those systems and seen it firsthand, you know, you walk up to Carlisle, it's the first thing you see. Glorious sign that says, kill the Indian, save the man. That's at every one of the boarding schools. But the boarding schools were governed by the doctrine of discovery. You know, a doctrine of discovery states that indigenous people are less than human. They're only 5/8 human. And it's still used that way. And from there you get to God's destiny or manifest destiny, which is just one of those papal bulls that was separated out that they used for Lewis and Clark. And so it wasn't a war crime if they killed these people and just took all their stuff. But then you go to the Dakota 38, and people are like, I never heard of the Dakota 38. It was a Christmas present by Abraham Lincoln to the United States. 1862, Dakota, Minnesota. Over 400 indigenous Indian scouts were brought in, and they said that questioned them all. Well, 40 of them admitted to one of the questions they asked them, did you kill any soldiers on either side? Only 4 of them admitted. So they were taken in and found guilty. And on December 25th, 1862, they were supposed to be hung in Dakota, Minnesota. Lincoln's wife wrote a letter to Congress and says, no, I already planned Christmas dinner, so they did it on the 26th. Anybody knows about any of the hangings, when people were going to gallows, they had, the executioner, he had figured out how far they have to fall for their necks to break. But if you look at the video archives, which you can still see, and see these guys that are hanging up there, and how the floor dropped, and some of them took over almost 45 minutes for them to asphyxiate. Put in a mass grave, all but a couple of the bodies were gone, the next day. They were taken for science, paid. So that's part of history. And it's listed in the Guinness Book of World Records, for the largest mass hanging in the United States. And there's Abraham Lincoln, signed the Suffrage Act with the same pen that he signed the death sentence for the Dakota 38. But people say, oh, he freed the slaves. Well, he only freed the slaves in the South. He didn't free his slaves or anybody in the North. And people don't realize that either. So, but they're not going to tell you that in history. They're not going to tell you that in your school books. Does that help? Yes?
So back to the name Canadohta. So what, if the history is wrong, that he was talking about, where do you know where that name came from?
Well, there was Canadohta, who was, from what I can find out, that Canadohta was Heron Clan through the Seneca, but it was never a chief. But a lot of times what happens is there was supposed to be a chief that lived up in the other side of Waterford, that was Miami's. Well, he was never a chief, but all the people just, because he was native and wore feathers, they called him chief. So that's how that name came. So there's many possibilities of what it could be. You look at the Jesuits and how they wrote things down. Our language, sometimes C's and G's, they're written with a K. So, Canadohta, Shigadake, those are all spelled with a K. So, you know, it's easily, when we talk about that, you know, the little telephone, is easily for things to get misunderstood. A lot of times, like I said, if the Jesuits wrote it down, it would have been wrote as a C. A lot of the Christianity and stuff, a lot of them would look at that and they would enunciate it as a C. So it's really hard to tell where it came from, but I wouldn't worry about it. If that's the name used for here, most of the part of the thing is, if that's lake is, you know, Canadohta, yeah, that's good, but you need to protect it. And if that lake, word wants to become sacred, I said it's even better. Yes, sir.
Talking about spirits and your holy grounds and that, how many different spirits or gods or what do they worship?
There's spirits in everything. Every plant, animal, in the Gaio, the Great Law talks about everything is living life. We believe in only one supreme being, but if we were going to say, well, it's God, we would say God would have to be female, because no man can give birth. Doesn't matter how many of these newspapers you read about this guy giving birth after transgender. There's nothing there that will support it. Only women carry that sacred seed. And so when we talk about that, it's like, you know, the 7 generations. We talk about everything we do for 7 generations. So if we do something wrong, that's going to last 7 generations. The Catholic Church came up, I guess about 15 years ago, figured out a generation was 32 and a half years. And if somebody being punished for 7 generations, 7 times 32 and a half. We don't believe in that. We believe that 7th generation is carried in the womb of the youngest female on this earth. So as a matriarchal society, you know, that's what we do. That's what we look at. You know, we keep them sacred. You know, we have so many issues with what we call the I-70 corridor that comes up through Erie County and stuff and goes to Canada, because the government's, 4 years ago, 1,500 Native girls disappeared. Got into Canada, and then they're taken and used in the sex trafficking. We post about it all the time. We've gotten lots back from Iraq and Iran, and you know, so we keep these children sacred. You know, if somebody is going to, you know, try to go after one of my daughters, they're not going to be in our room, because if they're still there, they'll still be laying there. If they're not there, you'll never find them. Yeah, and that's the problem with society is that under a matriarchal society, you know, you get in trouble, you go up there and say, oh, well, you can run the gauntlet. And, you know, you get 200 guys from the community standing there holding lacrosse sticks, tomahawks, and you got to run down through there. And you make it to the other side and you're free to go. But a lot of times people aren't going to make it to the other side. But that's one of the things is, you know, we consider all life sacred. When we talk about the covenant chain and those 3 in between, and we talk about this chain that the Senecas hold on one side and the Mohawks hold on the other side, because we are the doorkeepers. We come the center tree coming up for the middle, so we pull it tight so it's supported and it's staying straight. And then we have the younger brother, the Cayugas and the Oneidas, they're helping support that. And so when they're pulling the chain and they're supporting that, you know, that keeps us strong. So if we have elders, we have people with disabilities, but we don't talk about disability, we talk about diff abilities. Because even so, somebody's got Downs or something, any type of those, they will excel at another ability. So we call it diff abilities. We don't use the terms PTSD. We use PTS because it's not a disorder; it's a human factor. And so, but all that comes back to our matriarchal society and how we're raised. We don't have a lot of different spirits as what people think. And I've listened to, you pray to all these gods, and it's just, we pray to one supreme being. We don't have to go to church because to us, our church is wherever we're at. It's omniscient. It's in everything that's living on this earth. So that's how we look at it. Yes?
I got another question. As you know, we got tens of millions of new people coming into the United States now. If they try to come in and be a part of your group, how do you accept that?
If they don't have DNA, they're not part of it. We have a few people that have been adopted into the Seneca Nation or Onondaga or whatever. We have things, ceremonies and stuff to go for that. But where I live on Tonawanda, we don't have, if you're not native, you don't live there. When COVID and stuff, we shut the border down. We had one problem, we had a bridge, people would come in and poach deer and stuff. So they just blew the bridge out. It's easier to control three than it was 4. I look at it like, if our ancestors would have put up that bridge before Columbus got lost, we wouldn't have to worry about it. But there are people that come here, your families and stuff, the Scotch, Irish, Italians, people that come here, to get away from tyranny and some of the things that were happening there. To change, to find, to quote, the new world. So when they come here, we have the white root piece, but we also have the 2-row wampum. And when we have that 2-row wampum, and it's basically a wampum string, and it has 2 purple rows, and then 3 other rows. And so the 3, what we call the 3 in between, peace, power, and a good mind. It's what those 3 white ones represent. One line would represent Ungahoe people. The other line would represent non-Ungahoe people. So you had your boat, I had my canoe. We could paddle along beside each other. You get in my canoe and travel, come back, get in your boat. But at the end of the day, we go back to our boats. We do not have a foot in both boats. If you try to stand in one boat and I pull them apart, what's going to happen? Your legs will only spread for so far. So that's how we look at that. But we also look at that the human factor. A lot of times you see people listening to some of these countries that are exiling, their prisoners and stuff. That, over here, so, well, maybe they'll run the gauntlet. Maybe they, if you're going through as an Ungahoe person enrolled in Tonawanda, legally, I do not have the right to vote, to hold public office, or to drive a school bus or taxi, because I'm not considered a United States citizen. But people can come here from another country, spend 5 years, take a test, and then become United States citizens. For me to become a member of the United States, I have to denounce who I am. Anybody know who Deb Haaland is? She just got into, I guess she's a governor or whatever she is now. But she runs the Department of Interior. When she took her oath of office, she had to give up her Native American citizenship. The federal government requires that, and that's to control who we are. I've been in courts and stuff where, they require me to prove who I am in the federal government. The Religious Freedom Act, anybody that says they're Native American or Indigenous, they either have to have a tribal card, they have to have one of our passports, or they have to prove their lineage by DNA, CID. But I've been in court and said, well, they wanted me to prove it. And I asked the judge, I said, how white are you? I said, how white are you? They wanted me to use the Bible. I said, where's your eagle feather? I said, you're required to have an eagle feather here because you have the Quran. You have 8 other Bibles in the courthouse for all of these different things because they're not going to put the hand on the NIV or the English version of the Bible. I said, where's your eagle feather? I said, how white are you? Well, they want to charge me with contempt of court, and I'm just asking them a question that they're asking me. They're supposed to know. It's pretty bad when you go in front of a judge and you have to tell him the laws. And I've done it. I know other people have done it. Stated it. It says, don't you read your Constitution? Most attorneys never read the Constitution. Most attorneys can now tell you the Declaration of Independence. And I said, it was rewritten 87 times. But the words, merciless Indian savages is still written in the Declaration of Independence. Women have the right to vote. It's an amendment. But when you look at the first singer who tells you not to vote, who can't vote, white men, that's who's allowed to vote. So when you look at those, reading in the Constitution, now it's got all these amendments, but everything else is still there. If you're going to amend it, take it out. And we know that for a fact that they use it against us, because when we had the battles and stuff out over the pipelines going through our burial grounds and stuff in South Dakota, they were, here's the law. No 6 natives can be in public by themselves, so they incarcerate them. Federal law. So then now they have to go through federal court. Well, there's no federal holding facility, so we have a building here, we'll just put dog kennels in there, and that's what they did.
So when you think you live here in Centerville, you live close to the lake, what's sort of your feeling, how you feel that you connect to ancestors who had lived in this space? And maybe what was their village life like when they were in these lands?
One of the things, what I look at is the places I get to travel. And I've been to other countries, I was in New Zealand, and been Hawaii, all these different countries and stuff. But it's coming back, I have a medicine bag I carry, and it's got soil in it. It's got soil in it from Tonawanda. Because I always can touch that, I know where my home is, where my roots are. What's your ancestry?
Irish.
So if Irish means, going back to the homelands and stuff, you get back there and, people, got piece of the Blarney stone, get this from here, this from here. But you go to those other countries, you always want to take something back with you, or take something from here and leave it there. So, you look at that, and you look at those histories of stuff, of where we come from and what you do. So like when I'm here, I live on the reservation part of the weekend down here, but traveling back and forth. But to me, I was just out west, and to me, I kind of feel lost out there, not seeing any trees. When you got to lay down and hide behind a 6-inch piece of grass, and then fight for a rattlesnake, having a place to hide. there's no trees out there to get out of the sun. You know, so to me, being back here and being able to be around the hills, be around the mountains, and the way the water runs. Johnny Cash wrote the song about cornflower, and he talks about I remember when Johnny Cash came to our reserve. The Beatles have been there, you know, people from the Rolling Stones, other places. People have come to sit and talk. But I remember when Johnny Cash wrote the song about cornflower. As long as the grass flows, or as long as the grass grows and the water flows. That's what's governed to us by the Constitution of the United States in supreme right of the land. As long as the grass grows and the water flows. So when we're here, you know, we look at the trees and things that you can do. And he says, yeah, I'll be a tree hugger. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to sit down. If I want to get a nap, really good rest, I go turkey hunting and sit down by a tree, because the first thing you do is sit down, get snuggled in, wait for it to go to sleep. And any turkey hunter is going to tell you the exact same thing, because it's comfortable to be there. I tell people, I say, you're having problems. I said, go out in the woods, sit down behind a tree. You know, just sit back and relax, close your eyes and listen to the animals. You know, that's who we are. You know, what people don't realize that I come from a matriarchal society, but this earth is a matriarchal society. I listened to a scientist told me probably about 30 years ago, and it's stuck in my head. Every plant on this earth grows left-handed. So it comes from the mother. If it went right-handed, and as the earth turns, it would unwind. When you cut a tree in half, you know, anybody that knows, you know, how they produce, you peel the bark off and stuff, and how they're doing, you know, veneer, they just make a cut in there and they're just basically unrolling the tree. But they have to do it so it's unrolling, you know, right hand. Because every single plant, are we left-handed or right-handed?
So, looking at history, land ownership is kind of a European thing.
Right.
They're developing boundaries and deeds to ownership. So the Indian nation, they would drift, and how would they determine boundaries to other tribes? Or, you know, you would say, the women would say, it's time to pick up and move. Like, how?
Well, we would use white rooted keys. We had different territories. Like people say, like the Lakotas, they're out in the Badlands, and you know, some of the Lakotas came from down below Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, and they worked their ways out there. Tonawanda, we're the only nation still on our original land. You know, where Kenzu Dam is, and that was Corn Planter's grant. That was given to him by George Washington, but it was taken from him by another. And most of those graves and stuff were not moved because it's a government thing. And we know that they did because they still find burials, graves, and still find bones and stuff in creeks and stuff that wash out. And people are saying, oh, that's not, they always did that. So Washington, you know, went to a lot of places, and the places that he stayed, you know, they talk about a lot of the history. And one of the things that he noted, that every time a church community would come in, how did they control the natives? They built a church on their burial grounds. Almost every church around is built on the burial grounds. And that was done purposely. And that's actually, if you read some of the original church doctrines, and it tells you know, how to set up the churches, what they're supposed to do. So when you're looking at a lot of those places and a lot of those things, that's, you know, you have to look at, you know, what they did.
Not around here, but like over in Ohio, they have raised Indian burial grounds. Can you talk about those with the?
There are burial mounds here. Hightown, there's 2 of them. Over here on the Shreve Ridge, there's 2. On Gossville, over, it's Spartansburg, I know where there's one over there. Down through the Allegheny Forest and stuff, there's a lot of them down through there.
Where's the one over by Spartansburg?
Gossville Road.
What road?
Gossville,
Is there another road near that? I don't recognize.
Old 77 goes out straight through.
Yeah, I got that.
Yeah, so when you go out, you turn right on the Gossville Road.
Okay.
But a lot of the places, the mound builders and stuff in Ohio, you ever been to Ohio and you work with anybody that's a contractor? They're going to swear at you. Because you get in a backhoe, you start digging, you get down 2 feet and you hit solid rock. So the people that live there, we're not digging down there. So they built even their houses and stuff, their roundhouses were all built and covered with soil. We just did one, working on one in Wisconsin and then in Minnesota. And other places and stuff that they're doing those. Around here, a lot of the burials and stuff, people are like, well, I had cemetery. Generally, we didn't have cemeteries. You know, if somebody died in battle, they were buried there, and then their bundle was brought back. The bundle was their sacred stuff, with their clan symbol, you know, their feathers. It was back and then given back to their mother or their wife. In New York, there was a lot of shroud burials and stuff. There were in some of the deep cracks. You get down to the Indian caverns or Indian caves, what it is down east of Pittsburgh, and you know they were finding all kinds of burials in there. But the Hopewell community, that was one of the common things was their burials and stuff, but also of having they would dig down in, you know, a couple feet, but then they would put their pilaster logs and stuff in and then just build up and then cover with earth. And a lot of times, a lot of them were houses. You know, they weren't necessarily burial mounds. But there are burial mounds and there are quite a few of them around here.
It's interesting. Very good. We appreciate that you brought all your facts with you. And I think as we conclude, we'll let some people come up. You can explain some of the things you have here with you and give a talk. And we thank you, Liam, for your insightful message and about your life now, the life of your community, but also how it related to this area of the lake.
And I know one of the things, some of the tweets and stuff that I did talk to up in New York and stuff, one of the things that they said was, protect this lake with everything you got. Because if you don't clean it up now, you're not going to have anything to pass on. Because as polluted as stuff as it's getting, you know, there's simple ways to clean things up. But I thank you many hours to everybody that came. We appreciate it. You come up, you can look. Some of these pieces and stuff are original pieces. You can ask questions.
We'd like to present Leon with a little recognition because you've had a rough year, and our historical society would like to give you an honorary.
Yeah.
Thank you.